Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. As you know, today is Rochelle's official start to her year-long tenure as Interim Superintendent of MPS. So we thought we'd take a little time today for you to get to know her a little better. So she'd like the structure of this be more of a discussion rather than a news conference. So to start off, Board Chair Ellison will give a few remarks, and then Rochelle will give a few remarks, and then she'll also take questions from you guys.
Good morning, and thanks for coming today to learn more about our next leader, the Minneapolis Public Schools. I'm Kim Ellison and Chair of the Minneapolis Board of Education. I'm super excited and thrilled to introduce to you and the Minneapolis community our next interim leader of the Minneapolis Public Schools, Rochelle Cox. Beginning today, Rochelle will serve as the interim superintendent through the next academic school year, the 2022-23 school year. Rochelle will share a few remarks with you shortly and also answer a few questions, but I wanted to share with you why I think Rochelle Cox is the right leader now for Minneapolis Public Schools. In looking for MPS's next leader, the board knew we needed a trusted and proven leader who could provide stability and keep the focus on student learning while we work with the community to find the next permanent superintendent. In addition to meeting that description, Rochelle has served the students and families of MPS for more than 2 decades. She knows the ins and outs of this complicated system and can seamlessly move into this critical position. In addition to serving in several leadership positions since joining MPS in 1997, Rochelle has made some very key contributions to MPS. She helped develop the first Minnesota School District Special Education Licensing Program to ensure MPS-specific training. She oversaw a 17% increase in graduation rates for students receiving special education services. She reduced by 3 times the risk of over-identification of African American students as emotionally, behaviorally disabled. She brought students receiving special education services to schools closer to their homes, and she improved service delivery by working with Hennepin County to review cases for students receiving services from both organizations. For the past year, Rochelle has overseen the MPS COVID-19 response and managed and supervised 21 elementary schools. As Associate Superintendent, I want to officially welcome you to your new role, Rochelle. We're happy to have you here.
Thank you so much, Chair Ellison, and thank you all for being here today on day 1. I have been thinking deeply about being in this position, and I am looking forward to having 365 days to get the school district ready for its next superintendent. These will be days that will be filled with work, joy, and a focus on our students and families. It's a real honor to be in this role. I've been in Minneapolis for 25 years, and this position is such an honor and is very humbling to me as I sit here today in front of you. In my role of interim superintendent, I plan on having 3 areas of focus. Our board has worked very hard in the last couple months of working on a strategic plan. It's time for us to implement that plan and on the areas of its focus, and that is the academic achievement of our students. It is about the district and school climate. It is about effective teaching staff, and it's also about the well-being of our students and our staff, and that's physical and emotional well-being. I am looking also to honor the commitments that we have made. We have many unions that we work for and with, and those unions we have contracts with, and it's my job to honor the commitments we've made in those contracts. And I think that will go a long way in rebuilding our relationships together. We've also made commitments to our students and also to our families and our community. And our job is to really honor those through working together and to sharing responsibility for what happens here in Minneapolis Public Schools. And finally, it's all about rebuilding and building trust and relationships. And we're going to do that through communication. We're going to do that through enjoying our work together. We're going to do that by communicating well with each other and trusting each other. And so we'll be spending this year building that. And those relationships will be built between staff, with students, with our families, and our communities. I think we all have our compelling whys to why we're in education. I want to share with you for a moment what my compelling why is. My Uncle Ronnie was at age 4, after a high fever, had cerebral palsy. And he and I grew up together. The doctors told my grandparents to put him in an institution and forget about him. They didn't. They brought him home, and Ronnie sat at the kitchen table, and he and I grew up together. I think that's where my first teaching experience happened. I would teach him subtraction through eating cookies together as we spent time together. But I never really understood why Ronnie never got to go to school. And he was really my inspiration for understanding that everyone needs access to education, no matter what age we are. In Minneapolis Public Schools, we are proud to serve students from birth to 101. And that's really an exciting place to be. But he also taught me that access to education is very important and that every student can learn. It's important for me now as I'm moving forward to learn to be a learner also. So I think we all in education, no matter what our role is, we're all teachers in Minneapolis Public Schools, and we're all learners. So I really am approaching this year in both those veins. I'm often asked, what is your leadership style? And I feel like my leadership style is really about distributed leadership. And I share an example of when I was in special education, and I got a letter from the Minnesota Department of Ed, probably my first week on the job, and it was telling me we were very disproportionate in how many of our African American students were labeled emotionally and behaviorally disordered. And I thought, how am I going to fix this? What are we going to do? And it was at that time I realized that alone, as a white female leader in our district, it was not for me to solve. It was really a distributed leadership with our families, our students, experts in the field, and our staff. Together, we challenged each other, we developed strategies, and I'm happy to say that when I left the special education department, the risk ratio of our students being 5 times more likely than a white student being labeled, it was down to 1.5. So distributed leadership works. And you'll see that from me all this year also. I want to take time just to say thank you to the board and Chair Ellison for their belief in me as I move through this year. It's very meaningful for me. I look forward to that relationship with them as we move through the year together. And I also just want to take a moment to thank my family. They understand that this is going to be a lot of work this year, and their support is going to let me really focus on our kids, our staff, and our families this year as we go through these next 365 days. And I just want to say to everybody in Minneapolis, I'm really looking forward to meeting you. I plan to be out in the schools and in the community, and I'm really anxious to get this year started. So thanks so much for being here, and I'm happy to take some questions.
Can you talk about how involved you'll be in the budget? As I understand, federal funding will run out in 2024, which is past the time. I mean, you'll be interim, but
yeah,
how in your 1 year are you going to tackle that?
Absolutely. And I think that being in the position I had as an associate superintendent, I've been in those conversations, so I know the reality of where we are. We've taken some cuts this year, especially here at the Davis Center and our support services to schools. We will really need to work within the next year to make sure our new superintendent is set up with budgets that are realistic, that they meet the needs that our students have, and are also fiscally responsible.
And so what will that process look like of getting a permanent superintendent?
Oh, great question. I think it will be a year-long process as we go, so I'm planning to be here for the entire year. I think you'll see more information coming out from the board in the next couple months about where that process and what it will look like. I do know it will be collaborative with our community because that's really important to us.
Are you eligible to run for that full-time, or is it you just want this 1 year? How does that work?
I am committed to this 1 year, and that's what I'm really focused on right now. If you would have asked me a year ago if I would be sitting here in front of you today, and I would have said, "You're absolutely crazy." No, what is that? So I've learned to never say never, but I'm really focused on this year and getting it ready for the new superintendent.
There has been a lot of criticism that the board and GRAF did not advocate for the school development at the state level with our budget surplus. So could you talk a little bit about how you feel about that and what your plans are moving forward with your relationship with state and state funding?
Yeah. So the question was, to paraphrase, sorry, will we be more engaged with legislative agendas and that as a board, and also myself in the role. I've had a lot of experience with our legislative agenda here at MPS because fully funding special education has been a big part of that agenda for us for the last couple of years. Also, I've been working with the legislation on mental health supports, which I was also a part of in my former roles. So I'm very comfortable in that advocating role. I expect that is my position and that we will do that together with the board as we're moving forward, not only on surplus, but looking at funding for special education, EL services, making sure they're fully funded, and also looking at for supports for our students, such as mental health, counseling, and other things. So looking forward to working with our legislators on those topics.
With the temporary title,
Yeah.
are there certain tasks or projects you can't start or will try to start, but that's for the next time? Is there certain things you can or cannot?
So the question was, is there certain things that I can and cannot use? You should probably ask my board directors that, but I have had the opportunity to have personal conversations with each of them, and they have been fully on board with me moving forward and to not and to be my authentic self. And that means I'm going to tackle all projects as we're moving forward. And then my job will be handing those off in a way that the next superintendent will be very well informed and have a clear path of what next steps would be.
I have a question. You're talking about this style of leadership that's really distributed.
Mm-hmm.
As you look at where Minneapolis Public Schools is now and the people invested in this district and relying on this district, who do you need to focus on to go forward with that type of leadership? Is there a group that really, or several, that you really want to focus on, and whose voices maybe need to be heard?
Yeah, it's a great question. Thank you. The question was, in my style of distributive leadership, who are the stakeholders that I'm going to reach out to and really concentrate on this year? Number one for me is always our students. Our students know what they need. They know what they want. They know what inspires them and can fulfill their dreams. So I want to make sure that I have direct contact with our students, both through visiting with schools, spending time with them, working with our citywide student government. I think next when I think about that is our families. And I think that our families, for many reasons, over the last 2 years have felt that that we're here, but are we really here to partner with them? So I want to reconnect with our families. If there's a family out there who feels like, wow, I just don't feel like I belong in MPS, I will tell you over the next year, you're going to feel like you belong in MPS. And I want people to make a choice to be here. I understand that people have choices of where they go for their students' education. And I want people to be informed of where we are. I want them to be interested, and I want them to be inspired about what's happening in Minneapolis Public Schools. I also think the final relationship that I really want to talk about is our community. We have stakeholders in our community that want us to succeed. They might be connected to one of our schools. They might be connected to a certain demographic that belongs here in MPS. So it's going to be important for me to, in the next several months, to reach out to those community members. You'll be seeing get-togethers. We'll be having breakfast. I'll be going out to their events. Like I said, my family realizes that this is going to be a full-time 24/7 job, and I'm committed to that. And then my job will be to document, to make sure that as I'm handing off to a new superintendent, all those relationships are already in place, because I don't want them to have to come in and have to think that they have to rebuild those or make those connections. Those will already be made for them. And finally, I just have to say the last thing is our staff. Our teachers, our support staff, our bus drivers, our principals. They're all hold such an important role in Minneapolis Public Schools, and we can never forget how important they are and what they mean to us here as a leadership team. So I'm looking forward to spending time. I have a lot of relationships. You can't without being in the district for 25 years. And I appreciate all those that have already reached out to me today and over the past couple of weeks. I feel their love and their support as we move forward. Hi.
Hi. You talked a lot about building and rebuilding trust and relationships and reconnecting with families. Can you say more about what that looks like?
Yeah. Number one, I think, is communication. This morning, I sent out at 8 o'clock a video that's all about me. I want people to know me personally because I think that's where trust begins. I want people to feel very comfortable communicating with myself and our staff. So there'll be multiple ways through email, phone calls that people can get together with us. We want to hear their concerns. We want to hear what's working for them and what inspires them. Another way is we'll be having, of course, our parent advisory councils, and I want those to really be advisory councils. I want parents to tell us as we're starting new projects or as we're continuing through what's working for them and what's not working for them. And then finally, I believe it's us being out in the community at events and involved with organizations. We need to be where our families and our students are. I need to be shopping at Cub down the street so that people see me and they go, hey, all right, oh, you work for MPS? Yeah, I do. Nice to meet you. Yeah.
And that video she mentioned, I will also send to you guys to follow up. Any other questions?
Yeah, you shared your why for education. What's your why for Minneapolis Public Schools?
Yeah, that brings me back to that move here to Minneapolis 25 years ago. My husband and I were living in the St. Louis area. I worked and consulted with East St. Louis schools and surrounding areas. And our oldest daughter was entering kindergarten, and we made the decision to come back where our family is. I didn't really know much about the Minneapolis area, but I did know about the special education department at Minneapolis Public Schools because I've interacted with them in conferences. So this will tell you how old I am. Looking through the paper at the the classified ads, and there's a thing from TOSA in Minneapolis Public Schools. And I'm like, I don't really even know what a TOSA stands for. Learned it was Teacher on Special Assignment in their early childhood special education. So I went in, I had an interview, they hired me, and that's where it began, and where it began with Minneapolis Public Schools. And I will say at every turn in my career with Minneapolis schools and every job, there was never another thought about something else, right? It was always about learning and growing with Minneapolis Public Schools. This is my community. This is where I work. This is where I spend time, and this is where I engage with families.
Would you say just going back to the budget?
Yeah.
I kind of feel depressed about it when I think about the budget.
Yeah.
As an alumna of Minneapolis Public Schools,
Yeah.
I'm worried,
Mm-hmm.
and I know a lot of families are. So I'm kind of wondering, what is the plan in place, or are you saying that's what we're going to figure out?
I think we've been figuring it out year by year what the plan is. And I think it's time to start thinking about what the long-term plan is. It's challenging when your funding sources change year after year, and you're not quite sure what to expect sometimes. So when you have that interdependence with the legislature, with other organizations, with grants and grantees. So for me, it's really working with our finance group here, and really figuring out what are we looking at for that sustainability. And I think that there will have to be changes that will be made. We can't operate like this. We have to stabilize our enrollment and actually grow it. But right now, I want to stabilize it so that we also know what our income is coming in. So more to come. I really appreciate the question. And I know as I dig deeper in at this new role, I know the community is concerned about it, and we'll be addressing that. Yeah.
Any other questions? All right.
Again, thank you all for being here on my first day. Let's make a date for day 365. Sounds good? All right, let's do it.